That is the annual budget. And where that money comes from, 24% of revenue from state government, 21% from the federal government, and 21% from property taxes. This budget is, unfortunately, it's not enough, because the county's responsibility, in essence, is to provide a safety net. The basic services, health services, when people don't have health insurance, they go to a county hospital. When, in terms of public health, who's going to step out and ensure that, you know, the latest threat of West Nile virus is contained, that we have education and we've got teams involved ready to be on the move? It's LA County's public health department. Who makes sure that the gas you're pumping and paying so wildly for is actually accurate? It's the LA County Agricultural Weights and Measures Department. So this is all stuff I learned, I will admit, after I started working at LA County government. If you didn't work there, you probably wouldn't know, most of you probably don't know who your supervisor is. But you know, that's the way I was. There is, of course, responsibility for public protection. The Sheriff's Department is the largest in the country of LA County, runs a vast jail system, the largest in the world, sadly to say, which is also has one of the largest mental health facilities in the state. And it's actually, unfortunately, the place where most of the treatment of the mentally ill occurs. So it's it's very sad that the county has all these responsibilities and that basically it's been left to the county to handle all these things. But there are a lot of, the whole court system, you know, if you do jury duty, if you talk about probation, juvenile hall, all of the county. And then also, when we talk about the very poor, those who are completely out of luck, that don't have a job, don't have any means of income, general relief is available for them. Food stamps administered by the county. And of course, elections, a big deal now we're thinking about, run by the county registrar recorder. So just to give you a sense, I'm but one small part of a very large county government. And with 27 staff members, which is what we have, we're considered not a small department, really a micro department, because there's almost no department as small as ours in the county of Los Angeles. But we have a tremendous, tremendous challenge, because we're charged with how do we take this incredibly diverse world, this diverse county, and really support it so that we have harmony, we have healthy intergroup relations, we reduce hate crime, we promote the kind of understanding and sensitivity we need. Well, first of all, I wanted to point out that, as you probably all know, LA County is probably the most diverse place in the world in terms of the number of communities that are here, that are from different countries. They're the largest communities of their country here in LA. The number of languages spoken is daunting. The number of religions and faiths practiced, incredible. You know, it came that I speak Spanish and not Japanese because of the fact that I grew up in a neighborhood that had many Spanish speakers. And that was back in the 60s and 70s. Today we have, Latinos were 10% of the population in 1960, today they're 44%. And so we're in a very, you know, in a changing environment. And what happened too is that the Asian population grew tremendously, because up until the mid-1960s, my grandfather, for example, despite being here since the beginning of the century, could never become a citizen. He wasn't allowed to become a citizen because the immigration laws prevented him. And it wasn't until the 60s where that changed. And what it changed is that all of a sudden that people coming from Africa, Asia, and Latin America could become citizens. And so there was a big shift in the immigration demographics. And so we have gone through a period where that has been a major characteristic of our lives. We have seen a tremendous amount of change in communities, and that has been also a real challenge for our agency and for making things work. I want to say, though, that it's important to recognize that when we talk about all these differences of race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, language, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, immigration status, it's not a level playing field. You know, we all know that we grew up, there are dominant groups and there are not less dominant groups, they're the minority groups. And that this changes from different levels. You're talking about the United States, it's one thing. If you're talking about Los Angeles, city of Los Angeles, it's another thing. But it does matter when you talk about how institutions react, how institutions perpetuate themselves, how communities are affected. You know, I just marvel at the fact that talking about change, we're in a moment of history now when we are seeing presidential elections that could result in the first African-American ever elected president of this country. And, you know, I was talking with the group of young people earlier about the fact that, you know, I would never have imagined it when I was growing up because, you know, it just was such a different world. And there are these elements of change which I think that we often don't recognize. For example, you know, the number of inter-ethnic marriages is always growing. The number of multi-ethnic people, of course, in connection, is also growing. The census is revealing that the number of people who mark multiracial, multi-ethnic is a growing number. They're expecting it to be much larger, and we know that just by looking at our young people, that the number of people who have not just one ethnic heritage in their background, but multiple, is an increasingly large number. And I think that tells us that we're going to be harder and harder to pigeonhole. You know, it's really easy now to look at adults and say, ah, you're Asian, you're white, you're African American. But, you know, increasingly, we're not fitting into those neat boxes anymore. And that's going to be a good thing, I think, because it makes, it does what we should always have been doing, which is appreciate the fact that people are, within themselves, incredibly diverse. That we are not easily categorized into a stereotype. And we defy those stereotypes, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, you know, I'm reminded of the fact that there is a clear dominance of certain groups. My children who are, I'm married to someone who was born in Korea, raised in Brazil, and then grew up later here in the United States, in California. She speaks 4 languages, Korean, Portuguese, Spanish, and English. I speak English and only Spanish. Our children are speaking Korean, but because her parents are largely Korean speaking and they spend a lot of time raising them. But you know, what we notice immediately is that when it comes to time to speaking in Korean, they really don't like it. And it's like, why don't you like it? I mean, this is something that, gee, you know, this helps you. This is what your grandparents, who you love dearly, communicate to you in. Why don't you like speaking Korean? Well, you know, I've heard the story from other people. You know, once they start growing and they realize, you know, where the dominant power is, who are the people in control, what language do they speak? You know, they don't speak Korean. You know, you watch television, it's in English. So for them, Korean is, you know, a secondary language. It's a subordinate language. It's a language of not the ones who are in charge. And so, you know, that is the same thing that I think was experienced back in Brown versus Board of Education, when they asked the little African American girls, which doll do you find the most beautiful? And you had dolls that were identical, except for the fact that one was an African American doll and one was white. And overwhelmingly, the numbers were in favor of the beautiful one being the white doll. I mean, what does that tell you about their own self-image and their own self-worth? And yet, that's the kind of pervasive, subtle, but you know, omnipresent messages that we've been sent for so long about our own identity and our own value. I certainly never grew up ever seeing a doll that looked like me, I just want to say. I actually did find out that the G.I. Joe produced a 442nd doll, a Japanese-American soldier from, you know, the battalion that fought in World War II. But only online could I get it. But so, you know, it's really, it's great to have things like the Olympics, which project the chance to see people of different backgrounds, you know, capable and winning gold medals and being able to be on a level playing field, more or less.